Hey guys, tonight we are leaving the familiar behind. We're going on a long journey, not just through time, but across one of the most vast and forbidding landscapes on Earth. Picture yourself atop a swaying camel, the sun a relentless weight on your back, the world around you an endless ocean of sand. For weeks, this has been your life. But now on the horizon, a smudge of earth and shadow appears. It is your destination, the legendary, almost mythical, city of Timbuktu. Frankly, after weeks on a camel subsisting on dates and gritty water, you're probably less concerned with ancient wisdom and more concerned with finding a bath and a meal that doesn't crunch.so before you get comfortable. Take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It's always a huge encouragement. For those of you already settled in, I'd love to see where and when you're listening from. Go ahead and drop your city and local time in the comments. It's always amazing to see this little community stretching across the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The soft whir of the fan melts away, and in its place you hear the low, persistent sigh of a salt-laden desert wind. The rhythmic, swaying gait of your camel is a feeling that has been part of you for so long, you fear you may never walk in a straight line again. Your name is Aza. You are 16 years old, and you have left your home, the town of Jen, far behind you. Clutched in a fold of your dusty tunic is a letter, a precious letter of introduction from your father to a great scholar. You have been sent here, to the edge of the world, to become a man of learning. Your caravan is just one of many, a long, snaking line of camels and merchants approaching the city as the afternoon sun begins its slow descent. Timbuktu. At its peak in the 15th and 16th centuries, it was the glittering nexus of the vast trans-Saharan trade network. It was a place where fortunes were made, where slabs of pure salt from the northern mines were traded for their weight in gold from the southern forests. It was an intellectual powerhouse and one of the most important centers of Islamic scholarship in the world. The stories they told back in your village spoke of a city with roofs of gold. From this distance, the roofs seem to be made primarily of packed earth and straw, which is slightly less impressive but probably keeps the heat out much better. As you draw closer, the silence of the desert gives way to the sounds of the city. First, a low hum, then the bleating of goats, the shouting of traders in a dozen different languages, Songhai, Berber, Arabic, and the distant, rhythmic clang, clang, clang of a blacksmith's hammer. Your caravan passes through the unofficial city gates, and the smells hit you all at once. The familiar scent of camels and dust is suddenly mixed with the aroma of roasting meat, of exotic spices you can't name, of fragrant oils, tanning leather, and the wood smoke from 1,000 cooking fires. It is the scent of life, dense and overwhelming. Historians debate the exact population of Timbuktu at its height, with estimates ranging wildly from 15,000 to 50,000 souls. But all agree it was one of the most cosmopolitan places on Earth at the time, a true melting pot where desert nomads in indigo veils met river merchants from the Niger Delta. You see men with skin as dark as polished ebony and others with skin as pale as the desert sand. It is exhilarating and deeply intimidating. You try to ask a passing merchant for directions to the Sankor Quarter, but he just smiles and tries to sell you a length of fine blue cloth. It's beautiful, but it won't help you find a library. You slide, stiff-legged, from the back of your camel, your feet clumsy on solid ground. Your primary goal is to find the library of the scholar Al-Hajj Ahmad. Your secondary goal, which is rapidly gaining in importance, is to find a bucket of water and wash what feels like several weeks' worth of the Sahara from your skin and clothes. The caravan master points you in a general direction, and you are left on your own, a boy with a letter, standing at the edge of a labyrinth of narrow, winding streets banked by high mud brick walls. Every street looks the same. Every doorway seems identical. You are just one small, insignificant speck in this great, roaring engine of a city. The stories of Timbuktu were not exaggerated, you realize. They were understated. They spoke of the wealth and the wisdom, but they never quite captured the sheer, dizzying, vibrant chaos of it all. With the sun beginning to cast long shadows across the dusty lanes, you take a deep breath that tastes of salt and spice, clutch your precious letter, and take your first uncertain steps into the heart of Timbuktu, searching for a single, special doorway made of cool, dark clay. The city is a maze of packed earth. Every corner you turn reveals another narrow lane, another high, windowless wall of reddish-brown clay that looks identical to the last. The sun beats down, reflecting off the pale dust, and the noise of the market seems to follow you, echoing in the confined spaces. You've been walking for what feels like an hour, clutching your letter of introduction like a talisman, and you're beginning to suspect the city's architects designed it specifically to confuse teenage apprentices from out of town. The whole layout feels personal. After 2 wrong turns that end in a courtyard full of goats and one completely incomprehensible set of directions from a man selling dried fish, you finally receive a simple, helpful gesture from a woman balancing a heavy water jug on her head. She points down a quiet side street you had overlooked 3 times. And there, at the end of it, is a building that looks much like all the others except for the door. The door is made of heavy, dark wood, not unlike the doors of wealthy homes in your own town of Jen, but this one is carved with intricate geometric patterns, lines and diamonds that seem to whisper of order and precision in this city of chaotic energy. You stand before it for a long moment, your heart thudding against your ribs. This is it. The library of Al-Hajj Ahmad. You wipe your sweaty palm on your tunic, take a deep breath, and knock. The sound is a dull, solid thud, quickly swallowed by the thick walls. For a moment, nothing happens. Then you hear the slow scrape of a bolt being drawn, and the heavy door swings inward. The man who stands there is ancient. His face is a roadmap of deep lines, his beard is more white than gray, and his eyes, though clouded with age, are clear and immensely calm. He is dressed in a simple, immaculately clean white robe. You were expecting a great scholar to look, well, more imposing, perhaps surrounded by a shimmering aura of wisdom, or at least looking a bit more stern. This man just looks like a kind grandfather who might be about to offer you a piece of fruit. This is Al-Hajj Ahmad. You bow your head respectfully and hold out your father's letter. He takes it with a hand that is surprisingly steady, his fingers dry and cool like old paper. He reads it slowly, his lips moving just slightly. He finishes, looks at you, then back at the letter, and then gives a single slow nod. Without a word, he steps aside and beckons you in. You step across the threshold, and the world changes completely. The effect is instantaneous and absolute. First, the heat vanishes. The oppressive, heavy blanket of the Sahara sun is lifted, replaced by a deep, profound coolness that seems to rise from the very earth itself. Second, the light is gone. You are plunged into a gentle, welcoming darkness, and it takes a moment for your sun-dazzled eyes to adjust, to see the soft, hazy light filtering in from somewhere deeper inside. And third, most blessedly, the sound is gone. The constant, clamoring symphony of the city, the shouting, the bleating, the banging, the bartering, is snuffed out as if a heavy blanket has been dropped over the entire world. The silence that greets you is not an empty silence. It's a thick, humming quiet, full of weight and presence. It's so quiet that you are suddenly uncomfortably aware of your own breathing. You try to breathe more softly, which of course only seems to make it louder in your own ears. This remarkable change is thanks to the building itself. The libraries and homes of Timbuktu are made from bonko, a miraculous mixture of clay, enriched with straw and rice husks. The walls are immensely thick, a masterful feat of insulation that creates a natural form of air conditioning, essential for protecting delicate manuscripts from the desert's extreme temperatures. The masons who build and maintain these structures are part of a guild, their secrets passed down through generations. Scholars and architects still debate the precise origins of this distinctive Sudano-Sahelian architectural style, whether it was a purely local innovation or an adaptation of designs from across the desert, but its effectiveness is undeniable. As your eyes slowly adjust, you begin to make out the shapes around you. You are in a simple antechamber. The walls are smooth, cool, and curve slightly. High above, thick wooden beams stripped bare support the roof. The air has a unique scent, completely different from the city outside. It smells of dry dust, but a clean, ancient dust. And underneath that, something else. A faint, slightly sweet, papery aroma. The smell of old books. Al-Hajj Ahmad says nothing. He simply closes the heavy wooden door behind you. The last sliver of the bright, chaotic outer world disappears. The latch clicks into place with a sound that feels final. The journey is over. The apprenticeship is about to begin. He turns, his robes making a soft sweeping sound on the clay floor, and gives you a small, patient smile. He gestures for you to follow him deeper into the dim hallway. You obey, your heart pounding with a mixture of fear and wonder, about to see a place where books are measured not by the shelf, but by the room. You follow the soft sweep of his white robes, your worn leather shoes making almost no sound on the smooth clay floor. The hallway is short, and it opens into a much larger space. This is the heart of the library. It is not a single grand room as you might have imagined, but a series of smaller interconnected chambers that flow around a small sun-drenched central courtyard. From this courtyard comes the only natural light, falling in soft, hazy shafts across the dim interior. In the center of the open space, you see a single hardy acacia tree, its leaves a splash of brilliant green against the reddish-brown of the walls. And then you see the books. Your breath catches in your throat. It is the most astonishing sight of your young life. They are everywhere. Not on shelves, as you might have expected, but integrated into the very architecture of the room. The thick clay walls are honeycombed with hundreds of deep, rectangular niches, and each niche is stacked neatly with manuscripts of varying sizes. Along the floors and resting on low, woven mats are dozens upon dozens of heavy leather satchels, called mizab, each one bulging with books, their straps worn smooth with age. Against the far wall stand 3 enormous wooden chests, bound with straps of dark iron, and you know instinctively that they must contain the oldest and most precious volumes of all back in your village. The local imam owned perhaps a dozen books, and he was considered the most learned man for 100 miles. This single space contains more knowledge than your entire village has seen in its whole history. Feels a little overwhelming. You try to count the volumes in a single niche and give up immediately. There must be thousands, tens of thousands. These great libraries of Timbuktu, you will come to learn, were not public institutions in our modern sense. They were the private collections of wealthy families and esteemed scholars, built with devotion over many generations. The true wealth of a Timbuktu family was often measured not in its stores of gold or salt, but in the number and quality of its manuscripts. A single beautifully illuminated copy of the Quran or a rare work of philosophy was a treasure beyond price, a mark of true prestige. Al-Hajj moves silently to one of the walls, and for the first time he speaks. His voice is exactly as you would have imagined. A low, soft murmur, like dry leaves skittering across the ground. "This is our humble collection," he says, a statement so modest it borders on absurd. The books of law and jurisprudence are in the niches along the western wall. The satchel near the pillar contains works of poetry and rhetoric from Al-Andalus. In these chests, he gestures with a long, elegant finger, are the sciences, astronomy, medicine, mathematics, and the histories of the ancient kings. To your untrained eye, it is a chaos of paper and leather. But you realize that to him it is a perfectly ordered universe, every single volume mapped out in his mind. Historians and archivists still debate the exact number of manuscripts held in Timbuktu at its zenith. While some travelers' tales from the period speak of hundreds of thousands of books across the city, modern analysis suggests a more conservative, though still immense, number. What is certain is that it was the largest repository of written knowledge in all of sub-Saharan Africa. Al-Hajj reaches into a nearby niche and retrieves a small, palm-sized volume. It is bound in soft, dark brown leather, worn smooth at the edges from centuries of handling. He turns and holds it out to you. You reach for it and then hesitate, suddenly terrified. You hold it with the anxiety of a man holding a live scorpion, convinced you will drop it or sneeze on it, or somehow cause it to crumble into 1,000 years of dust just by looking at it too intensely. Your hands are still grimy from the caravan. You quickly wipe them on your tunic, a gesture that does very little, and then gently take the book. It is heavier than it looks. The leather is cool and smooth. You can smell the faint, sweet scent of the paper, an aroma utterly alien and intoxicating. A book is a guest in our house, Alhaj says softly, his eyes watching you carefully. And we must treat our guests with honor. We do not touch the pages with unwashed hands. We do not lean over a book as we read, lest our sweat or breath fall upon the ink. We do not leave a book open to the sun, for the light is a slow and patient thief. He pauses. These are the first rules. It seems the most important rule of the library is simply, don't breathe. This is going to be harder than you thought. He gently takes the book from your hands and places it back in its niche with a reverence that is almost prayerful. He looks at you, a boy caked in dust, standing amidst a treasure beyond measure. A tiny smile plays on his lips. Your father writes that you have a keen mind and a patient heart, he says. We shall see. Your apprenticeship begins now, but not with reading, with something far more important. You were hoping, perhaps, that your first scholarly task would be to read a work of sublime poetry, or maybe to translate a passage of Greek philosophy that had been preserved in Arabic. You imagined your brow furrowed in concentration as you unraveled the secrets of the universe. Alhaj, however, leads you past the rooms full of books, past the sunlit courtyard, and into a small windowless storage chamber at the back of the library complex. The air here is thick with the musty, earthy scent of old leather, and in the corner sits a large, sprawling pile of empty book satchels, the mizab you saw earlier. There must be 50 of them, all shapes and sizes, all coated in a fine reddish film of dust. This, Alhaj informs you, is your first lesson. He hands you a soft folded cloth made from camel hair and a small clay pot containing a thick, fragrant oil. Your task, he explains, is to clean every single one. You are to wipe away the dust, inside and out, and then work a small amount of the oil into the leather to keep it supple. This is not exactly the life of thrilling scholarship you envisioned. You came here to fill your head with knowledge, but so far, you're mostly just filling your nostrils with ancient dust. It's a slightly different educational path than you'd anticipated. You set to work. You pick up the first satchel. The leather is dry and stiff. You gently beat it against the clay floor, and a small cloud of dust erupts, dancing in the single shaft of light from the open doorway. You begin to wipe it down with the soft cloth. It is slow, monotonous, and deeply humbling work. Your mind, which was racing with the excitement of arrival, is forced to slow down, to focus on the simple, repetitive motion of your hand moving in slow circles. After you have been working in silence for a while, Alhaj speaks from the doorway. The desert is our great teacher, he says, his voice a quiet murmur. It teaches us that all things in time wish to return to sand. These books are no different. The dust you are wiping away is not just dirt, Azza. It is an enemy. It is the Sahara trying to reclaim this knowledge, one tiny abrasive grain at a time. He lets this sink in. And the leather, he continues, is the book's first line of defense. If the leather cracks, it allows the greater enemies to enter. Moisture. And the termite. As you continue your work, you begin to understand. This isn't a chore. It's a rite of passage. It is the foundational lesson of the library. Knowledge is not an abstract concept floating in the air. It is a physical thing, written on fragile paper with delicate ink, bound in leather that needs care. And it can all be undone by a single grain of sand, multiplied by 1,000,000. You are not just a cleaner. You are a guardian. You are the shield. The satchels themselves are all different. This is a fascinating, quirky tidbit you discover as you work. Some are simple, functional bags of rough goat leather. Others are clearly the property of wealthy patrons, made from fine reddish-brown sheepskin and decorated with intricate geometric patterns, the signature style of Tuareg artisans. You find one with long, colorful tassels, and another with the faint embossed mark of a family you recognize from a great trading clan. Each bag has a story. In one you find a single forgotten page of text, the calligraphy a beautiful flowing script you don't recognize. In another you find the dusty, brittle remains of a long-dead bookworm. You find one satchel that has a faint, lingering smell of perfume and imagine a great poet storing his verses within. You find another that just has a lot of sand in it and imagine its owner was simply very clumsy. Historians and professional conservators today still debate the exact composition of the traditional oils and waxes used to preserve leather in the Sahel region. While some basic recipes involving shea butter or other rendered animal fats were passed down, many master artisans had their own secret formulas, using native plants and extracts whose properties are still being studied by modern science. The contents of the little clay pot Al-Hajj gave you are a part of that secret, ancient tradition of preservation. At the end of the day, you are tired. Your shoulders ache, your fingers are stiff, and your clean tunic is now the same color as the desert floor. But when you look at the corner of the room, you see not a chaotic pile, but a neat stack of 50 satchels, their leather now dark, supple, and glowing with a soft sheen in the dim light. They look alive again. Al-Hajj returns, inspects your work with a quiet, approving nod, and leads you to a simple meal of dates, goat cheese, and flatbread. He doesn't say good job. He simply says, the dust from today will return tomorrow. You suppose this is the 16th century scholar's version of a glowing performance review. You have learned the first and most important lesson of the library. Knowledge is a fragile treasure. It is not won simply by reading, but by the constant, humble physical act of fighting back the dust. And with this new understanding, you are now ready to meet the man who embodies this fight. Tomorrow, Al-Hajj tells you your real work will begin in the workshop, under the tutelage of a master craftsman. The next morning, after a simple breakfast of goat's milk and a piece of flatbread, Al-Hajj leads you not to the main library, but to a different part of the compound. He opens a heavy wooden door, and a new world of smells washes over you. It is not the clean, dry dust of the archives, but something richer, sharper, and far more organic. It is the scent of hot animal glue, of beeswax, of curing leather, and of freshly cut wood. This is the workshop, the hospital, and the birthplace of the books. The room is a state of controlled chaos. A huge, scarred wooden workbench dominates the center, littered with tools you don't recognize. Knives of different sizes, sharp-looking awls, brushes made from animal hair, and heavy flat stones used for polishing. Scraps of leather and parchment are scattered on the floor, and along one wall, several large wooden screw presses stand like silent, patient sentinels. A man is bent over the workbench, his back to you. He is broad-shouldered and dressed in a simple, dark tunic stained with colors you can't identify. He is using all of his weight to stretch a large, wet piece of animal hide across a wooden frame. Al-Hajj clears his throat softly. The man does not look up. Yusuf, Al-Hajj says. This is Azza, the apprentice I spoke of. The man Yusuf gives a low grunt that could mean anything from hello to go away. He continues to work, his strong hands stained black and brown at the fingertips, expertly pulling the skin taut. He radiates an aura of profound grumpiness, as if his sole purpose in life is to be disappointed by the shoddy state of the universe in general, and by you, the new apprentice, in particular. Al-Hajj places a reassuring hand on your shoulder for a moment, then turns and leaves you alone with the master bookbinder. You stand there awkwardly for a full minute watching him work. Finally, without turning around, Yusuf speaks. His voice is a low, raspy growl like stones grinding together. The master, Al-Hajj, he says. He cares for the ghosts in the books. The words, the ideas, the stories. He gives the leather a final, powerful tug. I care for the body that holds the ghost. A body must be strong, or the ghost simply flies away on the wind. This is your introduction to the other side of knowledge. Bookbinding in the great centers of the Islamic world was a highly refined and deeply respected craft. The techniques used here in Timbuktu were the product of centuries of innovation. creating books that were both beautiful and incredibly durable. Yusuf is a master of this craft, and he is a man of many complaints. Over the coming days, you will learn that he complains about almost everything, and every complaint is a hidden lesson. He complains about the new paper brought by the caravans from Italy. Too thin, he'll grumble, holding a sheet up to the light. It drinks the ink and the words bleed. Give me good, thick paper from Samarkand any day. He complains about the desert humidity. The enemy of glue, he says, tapping the spine of a book. It softens the spine, makes the boards warp. It invites the mold. And most of all, he complains about the scholars. They break the spines, he'll mutter, showing you a book left open for too long. They treat them like common tools. They have no respect for the body. He gestures to one of the large wooden presses. A book that is not pressed is not a book, he declares, with the finality of a king issuing a decree. It is a sad stack of wavy paper pretending. It will never close properly. It is an embarrassment. He seems to have very strong opinions about paper. There is, you learn, some scholarly debate about the precise division of labor in these ancient workshops. In some, a single master like Yusuf would handle every aspect of a book's creation. In others, the tasks of tanning, papermaking, binding, and decorating were specialized. Yusuf, you get the sense, believes a true craftsman must master all of them. He finally turns to look at you, his eyes sizing you up. He doesn't ask you about your studies or if you can read. He points to a small charcoal brazier in the corner, upon which sits a clay pot of thick, brown, bubbling liquid. It is the source of the strong glue smell. That is the lifeblood of a book, he says. Animal hide glue. Your first job is to be the keeper of the pot. Do not let it get too hot, or it will burn and be useless. Do not let it grow too cold, or it will solidify. You must stir it every few minutes. Do not let a skin form on the top. And so your second day of apprenticeship begins. You are the official guardian of smelly brown goop. Your dreams of scholarly glory seem to be getting further and further away with every passing hour. At least the dust-wiping job had better air quality. You sit on a low stool, carefully tending the fire and stirring the pot, while the master bookbinder continues his work, ignoring you completely. You are starting to understand that to be trusted with the ghosts of the books, you must first prove you can be trusted with their bodies. And if you can master the glue pot, Yusuf has grumbled, then tomorrow, he will show you how to create the book's blood. The ink. You have survived your first day as the guardian of the glue. You did not burn it. You did not let it solidify. You managed to keep the thick, brown concoction at the perfect, simmering temperature for the entire afternoon. Yusuf rewards this monumental achievement with a short grunt as he inspects the pot the next morning. You have decided this is his equivalent of a heartfelt compliment, and you accept it with a quiet nod. Today he has deemed you worthy of a new, even more sacred task. Today you will make ink. He clears a space on his workbench, sweeping aside scraps of leather with the back of his hand. A book without a strong binding is a bird with a broken wing, he says, his voice a low rumble. But a book without ink is just a pile of blank pages. It is a body with no ghost. It is a house with no one living inside. It is useless. He sets down 3 simple things on the bench before you. The first is a small leather bag filled with a fine, deep black powder. The second is a chunk of hard, amber-colored resin that looks like a piece of glass. The third is a simple clay bowl filled with clean water from the library's well. This, he says, pointing to the black powder, is soot. The best soot comes from burning olive oil, but any oil will do. It is the color. He taps the glassy resin. And this is gum from the acacia tree. Gum Arabic. It is the binder. It is what makes the color cling to the page and not turn to dust. Water makes it flow. These 3 things are all it takes to give words a life that can outlast empires. And he is right. The basic recipe for this black carbon ink is one of the most durable and important inventions in human history. This simple mixture, a carbon-based pigment like soot, a binder like gum Arabic, and a solvent like water, was used by the ancient Egyptians to write on papyrus. And its stability and permanence are the reason why so many of the world's most ancient texts are still perfectly legible today. It does not fade in the sun. It does not bleed with moisture. It is, like the desert itself, patient and eternal. Yusuf hands you a heavy stone mortar and pestle. He pours some of the black soot and a few pieces of the gum arabic into the bowl. Your job, he indicates, is to grind them. Together. They must become one, he grunts. As fine as the dust in a sunbeam. And so you begin to grind. It is hard, repetitive work. The stone pestle is heavy in your hand. Your arm and shoulder quickly begin to ache. A fine black dust settles on your hands and forearms, getting under your fingernails. You are beginning to suspect that the path to scholarship is just a series of increasingly strenuous arm workouts. After what feels like an eternity, Yusuf inspects the powder. He nods, another one of his rare, minimalist approvals. Now comes the delicate part. He takes the bowl of water and shows you how to add it. Not all at once, but drop by precious drop as you stir the mixture with the small wooden stick. It is an act of pure alchemy. You watch as the lifeless black powder and the solid, golden resin surrender to the water, dissolving together to create a liquid. At first it is a watery, gray sludge, but as you continue to stir, it transforms, deepening into a rich, lustrous, syrupy black. Yusuf mentions, almost as an aside, that different ink makers have their own secrets. Some add a drop of vinegar to the mixture to help it flow more smoothly from the pen. Some add a tiny bit of honey or sugar to give the finished writing a subtle sheen when it dries. And some, he says with a dark look, add a measure of ox gall to help the ink stick to greasy or poorly prepared vellum. You learn from another apprentice that ox gall is bile, processed from a cow's gallbladder. You decide you would rather not ask Yusuf where he procures his. Some secrets of the trade are best left unexplored. There is, you will one day learn, considerable academic discussion among scholars of manuscripts about how to analyze the precise chemical composition of these ancient inks. By studying the trace elements in a single line of text, they can sometimes identify a manuscript's geographic origin or even link it to a specific workshop, all based on the unique fingerprint of its ink recipe. When the ink is finally mixed to Yusuf's satisfaction, he takes a calm, a simple pen carved from a dried river reed. He dips the nib into your creation, and on a scrap of white parchment, he draws a single, swift, perfect black line. It is crisp. It is flawless. It is profoundly and beautifully black. He then hands the calm to you. You dip it in the pot, your hand trembling slightly, and try to draw a line next to his. Your line is wobbly, thick in some places, thin in others. It looks less like a work of sublime calligraphy and more like a terrified earthworm trying to escape the page. Yusuf just grunts again. You decide to interpret this one as needs improvement. You have made ink. You have taken dust and resin and water and created the very substance of immortality. As you clean the mortar and pestle, you look at your own blackened hands and you understand Yusuf's lesson. The most beautiful poetry and the most profound philosophy are meaningless without a good, black, permanent ink to give them form. Today you have learned to make the book's blood. Tomorrow, he tells you as he covers the precious pot of new ink, you will learn about its skin. Your education in the body of the book continues. Having survived the smelly arts of the glue pot in the inkwell, Yusuf decides you are now ready to confront the most fundamental and physically demanding component of all, the page itself. He leads you out of the workshop and into a small, enclosed yard behind the main building, a place you haven't seen before. The air here is ripe with a pungent, chemical smell that makes your nose wrinkle. In the center of the yard sits a large clay vat, filled with a milky, whitish liquid. Soaking within it are several indistinct, pale shapes. These, Yusuf informs you with a grim look, are goat skins. This is the very beginning of the long, grueling journey to create a single sheet of parchment. Yusuf explains that the skins must soak for days in this bath of lime and water. The lime loosens the hair and remaining bits of flesh, preparing the hide for the real work. He uses a long pole to fish one out. It emerges dripping and slimy, a pale and frankly unappealing object. He drapes it over a large, curved wooden beam that looks like a miniature hill. Then he turns to you and hands you a tool. It's a linellum, a crescent-shaped blade with a wooden handle on each end. Your job, he demonstrates with a few swift, expert scrapes is to remove every last trace of hair from one side of the skin and every scrap of fat and membrane from the other. Your arms, which were already aching from grinding ink, have now entered a new and fascinating realm of protest. The work is exhausting. The smell is eye-watering. But under Yusuf's relentless supervision, you scrape and scrape. Slowly, miraculously, the slimy pelt begins to transform into something cleaner, something that looks less like a dead animal and more like a raw material. Once it is perfectly clean, the skin is washed repeatedly in fresh water and then taken to the workshop, where it is laced tightly onto a huge, rectangular wooden frame called a hearse. Using a series of adjustable pegs, you and Yusuf stretch the skin until it is drumming taut, pulling it in all directions as it begins to dry in the warm, arid air. This tension is the secret. It forces the very fibers of the skin to realign, to become flat and uniform. As it dries over the next few days, you return to it again and again, tightening the pegs and scraping its surface with the linoleum, making it progressively thinner and smoother. Finally, Yusuf shows you how to dust it with fine chalk powder and sand it with a piece of dried shark skin until its surface is as smooth as a polished stone. This craft is an ancient science. Technically, what you are making is parchment. The term vellum, you learn, is reserved for the highest quality parchment, made from the delicate skins of newborn or stillborn calves, a material so fine and expensive it was used only for the most important manuscripts. The quality of the page depended on everything: the age and health of the animal, the purity of the water, the skill of the craftsman. It was a costly, labor-intensive process, which is why paper, once it became available from mills in Italy and the Middle East, was so popular for more everyday work. But for the most important books, a Holy Quran, a royal history, a definitive legal text, nothing could replace the permanence and beauty of a well-made sheet of parchment. Even so, imperfections happen. Yusuf points to a tiny pinprick of a hole you accidentally made with an overzealous scrape. "Congratulations," he grumbles, though you detect no actual congratulations in his tone. You have given some future scribe the opportunity to be clever. Try not to be so generous next time. He is referring to a charming tradition. Scribes, when faced with such a small flaw, would often simply write around it. But sometimes they would incorporate it into their work, drawing a little frowning face peering through the hole, or adding a tiny, humorous note in the margin. Codicologists, the archaeologists who study the book as a physical object, can learn a startling amount just from these pages. By analyzing the pattern of hair follicles under a microscope, they can determine if the page was made from a goat, a sheep, or a calf. They can tell which side of the page was the hair side and which was the flesh side. The page itself is a historical document, telling a story of the region's livestock and its craft traditions. After nearly a week of work, your first sheet is finally done. Yusuf unlaces it from the frame. It is no longer a goatskin. It is something new, something transformed. It is a large, stiff, rectangular sheet, pale and creamy in color. It is so thin that light passes through it, and its surface is impossibly smooth. You hold it in your hands. It is the blankiest, most beautiful thing you have ever seen. It is a canvas, waiting for the ink you made. Yusuf takes the sheet, holds it up to the light, and inspects every inch. He runs his callous thumb over its surface. He finds no flaws. He looks at you, and for the first time, you see him give a small, almost imperceptible nod of true respect. The nod is so tiny you almost miss it, but it feels like a standing ovation. You feel a ridiculous surge of pride. You, Azza, have turned a goat into potential poetry. Just then, Al-Hajj enters the workshop. He smiles as he sees the finished sheet of parchment in your hands. "Excellent work, both of you," he says. "A special commission has just arrived from a wealthy patron. A book that will require the finest materials." He turns to you. "It is time you learned about the final element of the book's body. It is time you learned about beauty. It is time you met Fatima." Yusuf's workshop is a world of browns and blacks, of practical stains and the earthy animal smells of leather and glue. But Al-Hajj leads you out of that masculine, functional space, across the central courtyard, and into a corner you hadn't noticed before. This space is different. It is shaded by a canopy of woven palm leaves that dapples the harsh desert sun into a soft, moving mosaic of light on the ground. It is meticulously clean and quiet. This is the domain of Fatima, the library's illuminator. She is seated on a low cushion, bent over a small slanted wooden desk. She does not look up as you approach. Her concentration is absolute. In one hand, she holds a polished seashell filled with a swirl of brilliant blue paint. In the other, she holds a brush so fine it seems to be made of a single solitary animal hair. With a steadiness that seems impossible, she touches the tip of this brush to a large, open manuscript page before her, adding a tiny, perfect dot of color to an incredibly intricate geometric border. She is dressed as simply as Yusuf, but where his clothes were stained with the colors of earth and work, hers are accented with color, a scarf of a deep indigo, a bracelet of colorful beads. When Al-Hajj quietly says her name, she completes her single, perfect dot, carefully rests her brush, and only then does she look up. Her face is serene, her eyes calm and intelligent. She gives Al-Hajj a respectful nod, and then her gaze falls upon you. She offers a small, polite smile. It's a much warmer reception than you received from Yusuf, but you get the same distinct impression. You are a clumsy amateur who is about to introduce chaos into her very clean and organized world. That Al-Hajj explains that a new manuscript of the Quran has been commissioned by a wealthy salt merchant, and it requires the finest work. He tells Fatima that you have learned the basics of the book's body, and now you must learn about its spirit, the beauty that honors the words within. This is the art of illumination, the decoration of a manuscript with vibrant colors and precious metals. In the Islamic tradition, this art focused on the sublime beauty of pattern and calligraphy. Intricate, swirling floral motifs called aslimi and complex, repeating geometric designs known as arabesques would frame the text, transforming a simple page into a window onto the perfection of heaven. It was not mere decoration. It was a form of prayer. Fatima gestures for you to sit. She does not speak but shows. She points to a series of small clay bowls. In each is a rough, dull-looking chunk of rock. She picks up a piece of brilliant green stone, malachite. She shows you another, a deep celestial blue flecked with what looks like gold, lapis lazuli. This, Al-Hajj whispers to you, is one of the most precious substances on earth, brought by caravan all the way from the remote mountains of Afghanistan. Its color, ultramarine, is more valuable than gold itself. There is a reddish rock, cinnabar, for vermilion, a chalky yellow one, orpiment. These minerals are the source of all her colors. Your first task, she communicates through simple gestures, is to make the color. She gives you a small rough piece of the green malachite and shows you a thick, smooth slab of marble and a glass muller. Your job is to grind the stone into a powder as fine as flour, as fine as the dust you wiped from the satchels. Your arm, which has only just recovered from parchment scraping, is once again pressed into service for the cause of literature. You are beginning to think the main qualification for working in this library is having an unusually high tolerance for repetitive circular motions. As you work, you watch her. She takes a different pigment, the precious blue powder, and places a small mound of it into a seashell. Then she cracks an egg, separating the white into a bowl. This, you learn, is the secret to turning the powder into paint. The egg white is whipped into a froth called glaire, which acts as the binder, the same job the gum arabic performs for the ink. The entire process is as delicate and precise as cooking a fine meal. After a long time, you have produced a small pile of beautiful pale green powder. Fatima inspects it and nods. She shows you how to mix it with the glaire. Then, she takes the manuscript she was working on. It is an ocean of elegant black calligraphy on a sea of creamy vellum. She dips her single hair brush into the green paint you created, and with an artist's perfect confidence, she paints a single tiny, curling leaf on a vine that snakes up the margin of the page. The effect is breathtaking. The vibrant, living green seems to leap off the page, giving life and energy to the severe black text. She makes it look as easy as breathing. You know with absolute certainty that if you tried to do the same, you would produce a large green blob that looked less like a leaf and more like a very sad cucumber. You have now seen the whole process. The creation of the page itself, the ink that carries the words, and the color that gives it a soul. You have participated in the making of the book's body in all its facets. Al-Hajj, who has been watching from a distance, now approaches. You have learned the ways of the craftsman, he says softly. You have shown patience. You now understand the vessel. He looks at you, his eyes serious. Tomorrow, you will finally begin to concern yourself with what the vessel contains. Tomorrow you will write. The morning arrives with a sense of quiet gravity. There is no glue pot to stir, no pigment to grind, no skin to scrape. Today your real training begins. Al-Hajj leads you past the main library chambers to a small, private study alcove you have not been in before. The space is simple and serene. A single woven mat covers the cool clay floor, and a low, sloping wooden desk, polished smooth with age, is the only piece of furniture. A narrow, high window allows a shaft of pure, dustless light to fall across the desk, illuminating it like a stage. This is a place designed for one purpose: intense, solitary focused. At Al-Hajj gestures for you to sit. He then lays out your tools with the care of a surgeon preparing for an operation. First, he places the pristine, creamy white sheet of vellum you made with Yusuf. Seeing it here so perfect and blank makes your stomach flutter. Next, he sets down a small clay pot filled with the lustrous black ink you mixed. And finally, he gives you a new and used kalam, a pen carved from a river reed. He takes a small, sharp knife and shows you how to carefully pare the tip, splitting the nib just so, creating the perfect instrument for the elegant curves of Arabic script. Then he brings the book. It is a heavy, important-looking volume, bound in rich, dark leather. He opens it to a specific page, props it open, and slides it next to your blank sheet of vellum. The page is a dense, unbroken block of beautiful, severe calligraphy. This, Al-Hajj says softly, is the Risala of Ibn Abi Zayd al-Qayrawani, a great and foundational text of our Maliki school of law. He explains that the text outlines the proper conduct for all aspects of life: prayer, commerce, marriage, inheritance. It is not a flight of fancy or a work of poetry. It is a set of rules that holds their very society together. Your task, he says, is to copy this single page perfectly. You dip your new pen into the pot of ink. You hold it poised above the vellum, the tip hovering over the vast, terrifying blankness. This single sheet represents a week of hard physical labor. It is a valuable object in its own right, and you are about to make a permanent mark upon it. Your hand is shaking so much you're surprised the ink doesn't fly off the nib. You're less worried about a wobbly line and more worried about creating a giant black splotch that Yusuf will somehow feel through the walls, prompting him to burst in and confiscate all your writing privileges for life. Taking a deep breath, you touch the nib to the page. You draw the first stroke of the first letter of the first word. The black ink flows smoothly onto the pale surface. It is an act of profound and irreversible commitment. And as you form the second stroke and then the next letter, a strange thing happens. The world begins to shrink. The sounds of the library, the heat of the day, the worries in your own mind, they all fade away. The universe contracts until it consists only of the black ink, the white page, and the scratching sound of the reed pen as it moves across the vellum's surface. This is the life of a scribe. In a world before the printing press, the simple act of copying a book by hand was the only way knowledge could be preserved and disseminated. It was a sacred trust. Scribes were not just writers. They were the essential bridges across which all of human learning had to travel to get from one generation to the next. Hours pass. You make a tiny mistake. A letter slightly too thick. A curve not quite perfect. Panic flashes through you. You can't just erase it. You consider your options. Try to very carefully scrape the dried ink off with a knife and risk creating a hole, or learn to live with your own imperfection for all eternity. Eternity wins. It is a humbling lesson. At the end of many manuscripts from this period, scribes would add a personal note, a colophon. They would write their name, the date, and often a small prayer. Sometimes they would add a complaint about their aching back or a curse upon any thief who might dare to steal the book they had worked so hard on. It is a wonderfully human touch, a reminder of the real person behind the perfect text. Historians often debate the role of the scribe in this culture. Was he just a human photocopier, or an active participant in the life of the text? Every scribe introduced tiny, new errors, but they also corrected the errors of those who came before, sometimes adding a small note or a better explanation in the margin. The line between copyist and editor was a fine one indeed. When you finally look up, your neck is stiff and your back aches. You see that the sun has moved across the sky, and you have copied barely half a page. The sheer amount of labor represented in this one library is staggering. You feel a new respect for every single book you dusted. Each one doesn't just represent knowledge. It represents thousands of hours of someone's life, spent with an aching back and a shaky hand. Just trying not to sneeze, Al-Hajj returns and looks over your shoulder. He inspects your work in silence. He points to a couple of your wobbly letters but then nods slowly. The hand learns its rhythm only through practice, he says. But the mind learns focus through stillness. You have been still. He taps the complex legal text you are copying. The laws of man are important, he says. They bring order to our lives. But they are only one branch of the tree of knowledge. Tomorrow, we will look at texts that deal not with the laws of society, but with the frailties and miracles of the human body itself. The next day, your back still aching slightly from the focused stillness of transcription, Al-Hajj leads you to a different set of niches in the main library chamber. He gently lifts out not a single heavy volume, but several smaller, well-worn manuscripts. Unlike the pristine law book from yesterday, these show signs of heavy use. Their leather bindings are scuffed, and when he opens one, you see notes and smudges in the margins, the ghosts of many hands and many readers past. Law governs the community, he says, but medicine governs the body. One is useless without the other. He lays the books open on a woven mat in a shaft of sunlight. For the first time you see not just text but diagrams, drawings of plants, charts of the human body, and tables of complex information. Al-Hajj introduces you to the great masters, names that are spoken with a hushed reverence throughout the learned world. He points to a passage from the Al-Canon fi al-Tib, or the Canon of Medicine, by the great Persian physician Ibn Sina, known in the distant lands of Europe as Avicenna. He shows you another text by Abu Bakr al-Razi. These men, he explains, were titans of learning who took the ancient wisdom of the Greeks, of Hippocrates and Galen, and preserved it, tested it, and expanded upon it, creating vast encyclopedias of medical knowledge that were the standard for doctors from Cordoba to Baghdad, and even beyond. Al-Hajj begins to explain the foundation of their medical science, the theory of the four humors. The body, he says, is governed by a balance of four essential fluids: blood, which is hot and moist; phlegm, which is cold and moist; yellow bile, which is hot and dry; and black bile, which is cold and dry. Health, he explains, is the perfect equilibrium of these four humors. Illness is simply an imbalance. A fever is an excess of yellow bile. A lingering cough is a surfeit of phlegm. A deep sadness is the result of too much black bile. It's a beautifully simple and elegant system. It makes you wonder what they'd think of your current condition of profoundly tired arm syndrome. Probably an imbalance of parchment dust humor. But then Al-Hajj shows you something fascinating. He points to a passage in Ibn Sina's canon describing a particular herb for treating headaches. In the margin, a previous Timbuktu scholar has made a note in a neat, spidery script. The note adds the local Songhai name for the herb, and then suggests that a different plant, one that grows only along the banks of the nearby Niger River, is actually far more effective. This, you realize, is where the true magic of the library lies. It is not just a passive storehouse for ancient knowledge from other lands. It is a living laboratory, a place where that global knowledge meets and merges with centuries of local African wisdom. Historians of science continue to debate the degree to which the scholars of Timbuktu were purely preservers of existing texts versus active innovators in their own right. The key to this debate is found in these thousands of pages of marginalia. These notes clearly show that the city's doctors and scientists were actively testing, questioning, and adapting the great works to their own environment, creating a unique and powerful synthesis of medical traditions. You spend the day reading about treatments that are both strangely familiar and deeply alien. You read a description of using the bark of a particular willow tree to soothe pain. A folk remedy that works because the bark, as modern science knows, is a natural source of salicylic acid, the active ingredient in aspirin. You read about the proper way to set a broken bone, a technique that seems remarkably modern. Then you read a quirky passage about the use of powdered minerals as a cure for melancholy, which must be administered while reciting a specific verse from the Quran to be effective. It is a seamless blend of practical science and unshakable faith. You read one recommendation about the importance of a calm and cheerful bedside manner, as the patient's emotional state can directly affect the balance of their humors. You make a mental note to never, ever get treated by Yusuf the bookbinder. Al-Hajj is careful to impress upon you that medicine is not merely a trade. To be a physician, he says, you must first be a philosopher. To understand the body, you must understand the soul. To understand the part, you must understand the whole. You look at one of the diagrams, a schematic of the human body showing the flow of the humors between the major organs. The drawing is creative. It seems to have several organs you're not familiar with and is missing a few you thought were quite important. You decide not to question it. The man who drew it was a genius, and you are just an apprentice with an aching back. As the day ends, you feel a new sense of awe for the library. It is not just a place of law and theology. It is a repository of profoundly practical knowledge, a shield against death and disease. As you are helping Al-Hajj carefully place the manuscripts back in their niches, he points to a line in Ibn Sina's text. It mentions that the phases of the moon and the positions of the stars can influence the humors in a person's body. You see, Al-Hajj says with a smile, a good physician cannot only look down at his patient, he must also look up at the heavens. To truly understand the microcosm of man, you must first understand the macrocosm of the universe. To truly understand the microcosm of man, you must first understand the macrocosm of the universe. That is your next lesson. Your studies move from the enclosed, dusty rooms of the library out into the open-air courtyard as night falls over Timbuktu. The change is as profound as stepping into the library for the first time. The city falls quiet. The oppressive heat of the day bleeds away into a refreshing coolness. And the sky is a revelation. Free from the obscuring haze of modern city lights, the desert sky is a vast, profound blackness, so densely packed with stars that it seems almost solid. The Milky Way is not a faint, ghostly band. It is a brilliant, shimmering river of light, a celestial echo of the Niger River that flows just a few miles from the city. Before you step outside, however, Al-Hajj first introduces you to the tools of this new science. He carefully unrolls several long scrolls. These are the Zij, the astronomical tables and star charts that are among the library's greatest treasures. They are filled with dense, dizzying columns of numbers, complex mathematical equations, and geometric diagrams of breathtaking precision. This, you learn, is the science of the heavens, a field of study considered essential in the Islamic world. It was a religious necessity, crucial for determining the precise direction of the Qibla, the direction of the holy city of Mecca, which every Muslim must face during prayer. It was needed to calculate the exact times for the 5 daily prayers, which change with the seasons and one's location. And it was essential for fixing the dates of the lunar calendar and its holy festivals. Then Al-Hajj brings out the most beautiful object you have ever seen. From a soft leather bag, he withdraws a device made of polished brass. It is an astrolabe. It is a complex, intricate assembly of interlocking plates, rings, and pointers, all covered in elegant, flowing Arabic script. It looks like a golden mechanical spiderweb, and it feels heavy and cool in your hands. You are fairly sure that if you were left alone with it for 5 minutes, you would somehow manage to break it in a way that would offend both God and the laws of mathematics simultaneously. Al-Hajj shows you how this impossible-looking object works. It is, he explains, a two-dimensional map of the three-dimensional heavens, a handheld computer powered by observation. He demonstrates, holding it up and sighting a bright star through the rotating pointer, called an alidade. He shows you how to read the star's altitude from the engraved scale on the outer rim. Then he shows you how, by turning the intricate lace-like top plate, the reedy which shows the position of the brightest stars, you can model the entire sky for any given time. With this one device, a skilled user could tell the time at night, determine their latitude on the Earth, predict the rising and setting of any star, and perform dozens of other calculations that seem like pure magic. These astrolabes were not just scientific instruments, they were works of art. As you examine this one, you see a delicate inscription near the bottom, the name of the master artisan in Isfahan who crafted it over a century ago. Many were personalized for their patrons, with a verse from a poem or a dedication engraved upon them. There is an ongoing scholarly debate about the transmission of this knowledge to West Africa. While many of the texts and instruments clearly came from the great centers of learning in North Africa and the Middle East, some scholars argue for the existence of parallel, indigenous astronomical traditions, particularly for agricultural and navigational purposes, which were later synthesized with the more mathematical science of Islam. Al-Hajj gives you a practical task. We must know the Qibla from this courtyard, he says. Using the star charts and the astrolabe, he guides you through the process of sighting the correct guide stars, turning the plates and making the calculations. You get it wrong on your first 2 attempts, accidentally calculating the direction of a particularly uninteresting patch of desert and what you believe is Yusuf's house. You hope your prayers don't accidentally get routed to the grumpy bookbinder. But on the 3rd try, guided by Al-Hajj's patient instruction, you find it. You draw a line in the sand with a stick pointing in a direction that feels arbitrary, but which you know through the power of mathematics and observation is aimed directly at the heart of the holy city of Mecca, thousands of miles away. Good, Al-Hajj says. Now you know how a man can find God in the wilderness. He then points to the northern sky. And that is how a man finds his way home. He explains how the great salt caravans, which travel at night to avoid the heat, navigate the endless, featureless sea of sand. The stars are their only map, their clock, and their compass. The knowledge contained in this library, you realize, is not just abstract. It is the invisible thread that stitches the entire world together, guiding the prayers of the faithful and the commerce of the merchants. It's a humbling thought. The same stars you are looking at are, at this very moment, guiding a man with a dozen camels loaded with salt across 1,000 miles of nothing. You, on the other hand, are mostly just trying not to drop a very expensive piece of brass on your foot. You stand there for a long time, looking up at the vast, silent, orderly sphere of the heavens. You have studied the laws that govern man and the humors that govern the body. Now, you have seen the grand cosmic order that contains them both. The ancient Arabs called this the science of the sphere. Al-Hajj says softly beside you, a science of perfect, divine mathematics. But there is another kind of order just as beautiful and just as divine. An order not of numbers but of rhythm, meter, and sound. The order of a perfect verse. Your lessons retreat from the vast, silent courtyard at night back into the warm, dusty confines of the library's study chambers. You have learned the mathematical order of the stars. Now, Al-Hajj tells you, you must learn the musical order of words. He retrieves a new set of manuscripts for you. These are different from the heavy legal texts or the practical medical guides. They are smaller, more elegantly bound, and when you open them, the calligraphy is more fluid and artistic, the words seeming to dance across the page. These are the diwans, the collections of the great poets. In this culture, poetry is not a frivolous hobby. It is considered the very highest of the literary arts, the pinnacle of human expression. The mastery of classical poetry and rhetoric, or balaga, was the ultimate mark of a refined and educated person. Great poets were celebrities, their verses memorized and recited across the continent. The Holy Quran itself, Al-Hajj explains, is considered the ultimate, inimitable miracle of Arabic rhetoric, its language so perfect that it is seen as proof of its divine origin. To demonstrate, Al-Hajj does not ask you to read. He asks you to listen. He takes a volume of the 10th century poet Al-Mutanabi, and he begins to read a passage aloud. His voice, usually a soft, instructional murmur, changes entirely. It takes on a cadence, a rhythmic, resonant quality that fills the small room. You don't understand all the complex classical vocabulary, but you don't need to. You can feel the powerful meter, the intricate rhyme scheme, the pure, sonic beauty of the language. It is music. When you try to read the same verse aloud a moment later, you sound like you're reading a list of ingredients for making flatbread. It is clear you have some work to do. You discover that the subjects of the poems are as varied as life itself. You read passionate love poems from Andalusia, full of desperate longing and stunning metaphors comparing the beloved's eyes to a gazelle's or their face to the desert moon. You study the great Casidas, long and complex odes that might begin by lamenting the poet's lost love, move on to a detailed description of his camel, and end with a powerful tribute to a wealthy patron. You even read translations of older, pre-Islamic wine songs, celebrating joys that were officially frowned upon, but whose literary brilliance was too great to be forgotten. And you delve into the mystical verses of the Sufi saints, who used the language of worldly love and intoxication to describe the soul's ecstatic, all-consuming yearning for union with God. Al-Hajj tells you stories of the great poetry contests that were a highlight of cultural life in the great cities. Poets, like intellectual champions, would gather in the courts of caliphs and sultans to challenge one another, improvising verses on a given theme or in a difficult meter. Reputations could be made or destroyed in a single evening based on a clever turn of phrase or a perfect rhyme. This was not a dead art form, it was a living, breathing, competitive sport. But poetry is not just for beauty, Al-Hajj explains one afternoon. It is a training for the mind. It teaches you the power of words. He has you begin studying texts on rhetoric, learning how to construct a persuasive argument, how to deploy a metaphor to illuminate a difficult concept, how to recognize flawed reasoning. These skills, he insists, are just as important for a judge interpreting the law as they are for a poet praising a prince. Scholars today often debate the unique character of the poetry composed here in Timbuktu. While it was deeply rooted in the classical Arabic tradition, many believe it was subtly influenced by the powerful oral traditions of West Africa. They look for ways in which the storytelling techniques and rhythms of the local griots, the traditional keepers of history and music, may have blended with the strict meters of Arabic form, creating something new and unique to this place. Finally, Al-Hajj gives you your own assignment. You are to compose a rubai, a 4-line poem with a specific rhyme scheme, on the subject of the acacia tree in the library courtyard. You spend a whole day on it. Your first draft is a disaster. It has the rhythm of a falling rock and awkwardly attempts to rhyme tree with another tree. You crumple the parchment in frustration and begin again, this time trying to listen for the music first. After many attempts, you manage to construct 4 simple lines. They are not brilliant. They will not make your reputation in a poetry battle. But they follow the rules. They have meter and they have rhyme. You have created a tiny, self-contained universe of order and meaning. You read it to Al-Hajj, your voice trembling. He listens, head bowed, and then suggests a small change to one word that makes the whole verse suddenly click into place. A good start, he says. It shows promise, if not yet skill. You are so proud you almost consider showing it to Yusuf, but you suspect he would just complain about your wobbly handwriting. You have spent weeks, months, in the quiet, ordered world of the library. You have learned its crafts, its sciences, and its arts. You feel at home here. But knowledge, Al-Hajj tells you as you put the poetry books away, is not meant to be hoarded. It only truly lives when it connects and exchanges with the outside world. As if on cue, you hear a commotion from the front of the compound, voices louder and more numerous than usual. A new caravan has arrived, bringing with it guests and new treasures from the world beyond the horizon. The commotion you heard is the arrival of a salt caravan from the north, an event that is both routine and momentous. But this caravan is special. It has not just come from the distant mines of Tagaza. It has carried with it a special guest, a wealthy merchant scholar on the final leg of a journey that began nearly a year ago in a land so far away it exists for you only in stories. Persia. The library's quiet, inward-facing rhythm is broken. The air buzzes with a new energy. Al-Hajj, who is usually the soul of calm contemplation, is now a gracious and attentive host. He asks you and the other junior apprentices to bring fresh water for the guests and to prepare the finest mint tea. You see a side of him you hadn't seen before, the public face of one of Timbuktu's great intellectual leaders. The visitor is named Farid al-Isfahani. He is a man in his late middle age, with a neatly trimmed beard streaked with gray and keen, intelligent eyes that seem to miss nothing. He is dressed not in the practical, flowing robes of the desert, but in fine, layered silks of deep blue and green, fabrics that seem to drink the sunlight. He speaks Arabic with a melodious, rolling accent that is different from any you have ever heard. He is the outside world made flesh. His presence is a vivid reminder that Timbuktu is not an isolated outpost, but a great port city on the southern shore of the vast ocean of sand, a destination for travelers from across the known world. After the formal greetings and the slow, ritualistic serving of 3 rounds of sweet tea, the real purpose of the visit is revealed. The merchant has brought gifts for the library. His servants bring forward a heavy chest, bound in leather and sealed with wax against the desert dust. With a sense of ceremony, he opens it. Inside, nestled in soft cloth, are not silks or spices or silver, but books. New books. A wave of palpable excitement ripples through the small gathering of scholars Al-Hajj has invited for the occasion. Even Yusuf, the grumpy bookbinder, emerges from his workshop to inspect the new arrivals. He eyes the bindings with deep suspicion, grumbling that the Egyptian leather is too soft and will crack in the dry season, but you see a flicker of genuine excitement in his eyes. New bodies for him to care for. Farid presents the books to Al-Hajj one by one. There is a new commentary on the logic of Aristotle, freshly copied in Cairo. There is a diwan of a celebrated poet from Damascus, whose work has been spoken of by travelers but never before seen here. And there is a medical text, an atlas of anatomy with colored illustrations far more detailed and lifelike than any in your own library's collection. Each volume is handled with a reverence usually reserved for holy relics. This is how the library grows. This is how it stays alive. Knowledge, you see, is also a form of trade, flowing along the same routes as the salt and gold. Indeed, books were one of the most valuable commodities in Timbuktu. A finely made copy of an important text could be sold for a fortune, its price far exceeding that of other luxury goods. The city's scribes, its binders, its illuminators, they were all part of a thriving and highly profitable book industry. Historians debate the primary direction of this intellectual commerce. Was Timbuktu mainly a recipient of learning from the great centers of the Islamic East? Or was it also a major exporter of its own unique scholarship, particularly in law and history? The truth is that it was a dynamic, two-way street, a place of both reception and transmission. That evening, the whole library gathers in the courtyard to listen to Farid speak. He tells stories of the great, teeming cities of Cairo and Damascus, of the Mamluk Sultan's court, of the smell of the Mediterranean Sea. He describes a thing called snow, a kind of cold, white sand that falls from the sky in winter and then, even more bizarrely, melts into water. Everyone listens with polite fascination, but you all privately agree that it sounds completely unbelievable, far more fantastical than any story of jinns or monsters. The world, you realize, is a much larger and stranger place than you had ever conceived. He talks about the food, and you listen, captivated, until he politely declines a second helping of the evening's millet porridge. Apparently, the great cities also have better food. This is a truly troubling revelation. The merchant stays for 2 days, exchanging ideas with Al-Hajj and commissioning copies of several texts from the library that he wishes to take back with him. His visit leaves behind a sense of exhilaration, a powerful reminder of the value of the treasure you are all guarding. This library is not just a local resource, it is a vital node in a network that stretches across the entire world, but the visit also leaves behind a subtle sense of anxiety. Such a treasure is precious, and precious things are fragile. The next day, after Farid's caravan has departed on its journey south toward the river, you notice the sky beginning to change. The brilliant blue is hazy, tinged with a sickly yellow-brown. The wind picks up, carrying not the scent of salt, but the dry, sharp taste of sand. A hush falls over the city. The oldest and most relentless enemy of Timbuktu, the enemy that respects no book and no scholar, is coming. The sky darkens with an unnatural speed. The sun, which was blazing just an hour ago, is now a pale, hazy wafer behind a curtain of yellow dust. The wind begins to rise, at first just a whisper, then a low, mournful howl that seems to come from the very soul of the desert. In the streets of Timbuktu, a practiced and frantic energy takes hold. Shopkeepers hurry to shutter their stalls, people pull their robes tighter and scurry for shelter, and herders hustle their goats into walled enclosures. The vibrant, noisy city you have come to know simply vanishes, leaving only the wind and the encroaching gloom. Inside the library, there is no panic. There is only a grim, focused urgency. This is a familiar enemy, the oldest enemy of all. Al-Hajj claps his hands once, a sharp sound in the growing quiet, and everyone knows what to do. This is a drill that has been practiced for generations. Yusuf emerges from his workshop, his usual grumpiness replaced by the fierce intensity of a general defending his fortress. You suspect he secretly enjoys having a tangible foe he can fight, one that doesn't try to argue with him about the proper way to glue a spine. Your first task is to help seal the building. You and the other apprentices are given stacks of old cloth, which you quickly soak in water from the well. Then you go to every door, every window shutter, and you painstakingly stuff the damp rags into every single crack and seam. It is a desperate and seemingly futile act against an enemy that is as small as a particle of dust, but it is the first and most important line of defense. Next, you move to the library chambers themselves. Heavy woven blankets, also dampened, are brought out and carefully hung over the openings of the wall niches, shielding the stacks of manuscripts from the worst of the inevitable dust. You help Yusuf move the heavy wooden chests away from the outer walls and cover them with thick, oiled leather hides. The goal is to create layers of protection, a fortress within a fortress. This is a battle against the harmattan, the dry, dusty wind that blows from the heart of the Sahara every year. For days or even weeks, it can blanket the entire region in a thick haze, carrying millions of tons of sand and topsoil for thousands of miles. It can blot out the sun, ground the caravans, and cover every surface in a fine, gritty film. Protecting a library filled with priceless, delicate manuscripts from this annual assault was the single greatest challenge for the scholars of Timbuktu. By the time you are finished, the storm is upon you. The world outside the library walls is a roaring, shrieking chaos. You cannot see it, but you can hear and feel it. The constant, deafening howl of the wind is a physical pressure on your ears. You can hear the sharp, scouring sound of sand being blasted against the outer walls of the building. Even inside these thick clay walls, the air grows hazy, filled with the finest particles that have found their way through your defenses. You can feel the grit on your teeth. It's a profound lesson in humility. You can possess all the accumulated wisdom of the ages, but you cannot win an argument with the wind. The light from the central courtyard fades, plunging the library into a deep orange-tinted twilight. There is nothing more to be done. The defenses are set. Now you can only wait. Al-Hajj gathers you, the other apprentices, Yusuf and Fatima, in one of the central rooms, the most protected part of the building. He lights a single flickering oil lamp. Its small, steady flame is a comforting beacon in the roaring darkness. And in the calm, rhythmic voice you have come to know so well, He begins to recite a chapter from the Quran. His voice does not tremble. It is an anchor of serenity in the heart of the storm. You try to focus on his words, on the familiar, beautiful verses. But mostly you are thinking about the thousands of books, sitting silently in the other rooms, protected only by damp cloth and your own frantic handiwork. You're also hoping, with a sudden surge of anxiety, that the roof doesn't decide to take a short, unscheduled trip to the next village. The hours crawl by, the sound of the wind a constant, deafening lullaby. There is no work to be done, no lessons to be learned, only the shared, silent experience of waiting for the desert to exhaust its fury. The storm finally breaks around dawn. The constant, deafening roar of the wind, a sound that has become the entire world, fades to a low moan, then a whisper, and then at last to a profound silence. A strange, muffled quiet hangs over the city of Timbuktu. The air is thick and heavy, but the demonic howling is gone. Cautiously, you help unbar the main door. The world outside is transformed. Everything is covered in a smooth, undulating blanket of fine, reddish sand, as if a soft new landscape has been laid down overnight. The work of the storm is over, but your work is just beginning. You and the others spend the entire day in the painstaking process of cleaning. You take down the damp cloths, now caked with mud. You sweep the floors, gathering piles of the incredibly fine dust that managed to penetrate your defenses. Every single book satchel you so carefully cleaned weeks ago must be taken down and cleaned all over again. The dust, as Al-Hajj predicted, has returned. Days turn into weeks, weeks into months, and the months blur into years. The sandstorms come and they go. The caravans arrive and depart. The great cycle of life in Timbuktu continues. And you, Azza, are no longer the nervous, wide-eyed boy who arrived from Jen. You are a young man now. Your shoulders are broader from the physical work of the library. Your hands are permanently stained with a faint trace of black ink at the cuticles. Your robes are simple, but you wear them with the quiet confidence of someone who belongs. You can now read a page of dense legal text and debate its meaning with Al-Hajj. You can assist Yusuf with a complex binding, knowing just how much pressure to apply in the press. You can even identify the likely origin of a manuscript just by the feel of its parchment and the scent of its pages. Your life has found its rhythm, a rhythm dictated not by the market or the seasons, but by the needs of the library. The day is structured by the 5 calls to prayer, and the spaces in between are filled with the quiet, satisfying work of preservation and study. This work, you have come to realize, is part of a chain stretching back centuries, and one that will be carried on by others for centuries to come. The precious manuscripts of Timbuktu have survived droughts, invasions, and the endless siege of the desert because of this unbroken chain of quiet, dedicated guardians. One late afternoon, you are sitting in the courtyard with Al-Hajj. He is truly an old man now, his movements slow, his voice as soft as dust. You are sharing a glass of sweet mint tea, watching the setting sun paint the mud brick walls in shades of gold and orange. Yusuf is nearby, inspecting a new delivery of goat skins. He holds one up to his nose, sniffs it with a critical expression, and declares it barely adequate. Some things you have learned will never change. His grumpiness is as constant as the northern star you once used to find the Qibla. You are drinking the second of the 3 traditional glasses of tea. The first, strong and bitter, is like life. This second glass, sweeter and richer, is like love. The final, very sweet glass will be like death. This simple ritual is a philosophy lesson in itself. Fatima, now a revered master illuminator, is quietly teaching her own young apprentice in a corner of the courtyard. You watch the girl struggling to grind a piece of malachite and you smile. You feel an urge to tell her that it gets easier, but you know it is a lesson everyone must learn for themselves, preferably with an aching arm. The ultimate fate of all the manuscripts in Timbuktu is a topic of great interest to scholars today. Many have been lost, but hundreds of thousands have been saved from conflict and decay by the brave, secret efforts of their hereditary guardians, a modern continuation of the very work you are doing now. That Al-Hajj looks at a commentary you have been writing on a work of philosophy. Your arguments are sound, he says, his eyes twinkling. But your handwriting still needs practice, even after all these years. He sighs contentedly, looking at the rows of niches and the chests full of books. We do not do this for ourselves, Azza, he says softly. We do not guard these books from the sand and the worm just for our own prestige. We are a bridge. We guard the wisdom of those who came before us, and we keep it safe for those who are not yet born. That is all. That is enough. The last ray of sun leaves the courtyard, and the call to evening prayer begins to echo softly over the city walls. The day is done. And your long day as an apprentice, your journey from a boy to a man of learning, is also coming to a gentle and quiet close. The story is over now. The great library of Timbuktu settles into the cool desert night, its treasures safe, its guardians at peace. The memory of the buzzing city, the scent of the hot sand, the patient voice of Al-Hajj, and the grumpy wisdom of Yusuf can all begin to soften and fade. There is nothing left to learn tonight, nothing left to do. The books are all on their shelves, resting in the quiet darkness. And you can rest now, too. Let the images of the day dissolve like sugar in warm tea. Feel the stillness of the library wrap around you like a soft blanket. There is only the quiet now, the gentle hush that comes after a long story has been told. Just let your mind be still, and allow yourself to drift into a deep and peaceful sleep.